Welcome back. Today is July 19th. I haven't looked at my stock market account yet, so that will be interesting. I'll do that during this video. And I wanted to talk about three things, especially because the stocks are going back down. The first one is z-axis. I'll explain what that means in a little bit. The second is percentages in terms of how to think about investing in percentages instead of dollar number amounts. And then the last one is kind of a recap of this strategy, which is long-term investing with leverage. Long-term investing with leverage is basically the same as if I was to just have stock instead of options, but the difference is that I'm using call options because that gives me more bang for my buck. So let's look at this chart real quick. Tesla is down today 4%. Overall this week we started off at like 260 and now we're down to 239. Honestly, if you look at the big picture, I'm okay with that. I still think we're going to get to this X at some point, roughly around this time frame. So whether or not we have some chop in between, that's okay. And honestly, I kind of predicted this, and we did bounce off this pretty arbitrary blue line. But if anything, that's still a good sign. It looks like technicals are still good. And yeah, I mean, nothing crazy. Also, if you look at NVIDIA, which is pretty much like the stock of the decade at this point, you can kind of see anytime that NVIDIA has a big pop, a lot of times it comes back down. And that's happened on several occasions since it started this bull run for the ages. And basically one example is it went to 18 and then it went all the way down to 13 back in 2022. Another example is way up here. It got all the way up to 50 and then it went all the way down to 38. Another example is it went all the way up to 96 and then it went all the way down to 74. If you ignore kind of the short-term chop and you just look at where we started and where we are now, even after the big dip in this whole week, we went from 11 to 117. Incredible. So once again, I'm sticking with the strategy. I actually have better peace of mind when I'm losing money, because when I'm gaining money, I get anxious and I feel like, I don't know, it just makes me stressed. But when I'm losing money, I know that I have time to recuperate, and it's kind of hard to explain. It took me years to get to that point. So when it comes to z-axis, I want to show a picture of what a z-axis is if you're not familiar. So an x and a y-axis is a 2D graph where you can see like two different variables charted along themselves. A z-axis is a third direction. So an xy is just like a 2D, xyz axis would be a 3D graph. When it comes to traditional investing, I always believe that just buying shares and just selling shares is kind of like investing on a 2D axis that looks exactly like this, where you can only buy and you can only sell. The z-axis for me personally is the amount of leverage that I use. So the sendometer that I have here is actually basically like a z-axis, like a vector. So how intense am I investing at any given time? So with this strategy of using call options instead of shares, the z-axis gives me the opportunity to choose how much should I have in options versus shares. And so generally, I have more in options right now because I'm starting a new account, a new series, and I have my bull hypothesis for like a 5-year timeline. But that's kind of the idea here. So the second thing for this video is percentages. And percentages is the idea that when you're investing, you should always think about what percentage you're making and not how much money you're making. So if you make 10%, you could be making 10% on 20 bucks or $2 million. The difference is 10% on 20 bucks is only $2. 10% on $20 million or whatever I said is $2 million. So the same process to get the same exact 10% return can vary enormously in terms of the actual dollar figure. And so one horrible thing that I learned and overcame when I started investing is to equate your stock market gains with real world dollars and think about how much money that is in real life. Like, oh my God, I can buy X amount of whatever with the amount of dollars I made today. That is, I think, a curse, because what happens is on days like today where I lose money, which once again, I haven't even noticed or seen what that number is yet, it makes you depressed. But also on days that you make money, you start to become euphoric. It's almost like you're bipolar and all of a sudden everything is so good. And then you start to like lose grip of reality, lose grip of the strategy. It's just to the point where it's no longer logical. It becomes emotional investing. So I'm going to look at the percentages in just a second here on Robinhood. And also the other thing is all of this money that I have in this series, in this account, is kind of a kind of just an experiment, actually. It's a bit of a hypothesis, and I wouldn't even sell much until I get to roughly $1 million anyway, and like to take out of the account permanently. And so I think I'm okay with where I'm at financially, to the point where gaining and losing certain dollar amounts doesn't even matter. I'm looking at the big picture. My time horizons are roughly 1.5 years from now and 5 years from now. So we'll see what happens. This whole series is only 2 months old. And yeah, I guess I already talked about this. That's the strategy with the Z-axis thing. So moment of truth. Let's see. Sendometer for today, I'm going to say I'm slightly higher at 50 because all tech stocks got killed. And GME, I'm actually slightly lower than I thought I was. So let's just keep that at 65. GME went down actually, so the timing was pretty bad. But maybe I'll average down and we'll see what happens. Also today, I forgot to mention Microsoft had like that CrowdStrike thing that like totally bricked every computer in the world, which I think also affected the stocks today. Fear and greed is 49. All right, moment of truth. I think I'm down like 13,000. Oh, 12. Yeah, almost exactly 13,000. Pretty good guess. So overall, this week was pretty crazy. I remember I was up 20 grand in just a few hours Monday morning, and now overall we're down 17,000 for the week, meaning that from here to where we are today, that's $37,000. In the grand scheme of things, I'm not really too concerned because year to date it's still 59,000. That's fine. That's part of the strategy. Today, a lot of these. So let's take a look at the percentages. So 12% loss here, 10%, 8%, 15, 16, 16, 14, 14, 10. Not the greatest, obviously, but it could be worse. I think in the grand scheme of things, I did sell just 3 of these, so I did take some profits, and I can always buy back in. So once again, it kind of sucks. It hurts to see, but I think the pain is temporary. That's why I'm going to make the video. I think it's going to be called Pain is Temporary. You just got to stick with the plan, and eventually, if things go right, you'll be rewarded. One thing that I'll end on is a long time ago, I remember I sold, and I realized the feeling that's the worst in the stock market isn't when you're losing money. It's actually when you sell too early and you miss out on what could have been had you just done nothing. I think for whatever reason, personally, mentally, that is significantly more brutal and painful, and it actually like ruined me a little bit. And so just personally, for my mental sanity, I don't really care about this account as much as I thought I would anymore, like maybe from a couple years ago when I was doing this. And it's because of that reason. If I sold and it kept going up, I would be significantly more destroyed, more mentally distraught than if I had just left it alone. And clearly that isn't working for this week, but overall it's still working. I mean, I'm not complaining. 60 grand in pretty much 2 months is not bad. So we'll just continue the ride. We'll continue the show. We'll see what happens. I still think GameStop's going to go up. I still think Tesla's going to chop a little bit. They have earnings next week, and we'll see what happens. When it's going down a little bit after this huge spike, it gives me reassurance that we're not going into cuckoo land, that the stock is not completely detached from reality and people just get into this hype cycle. So I like that. I think it's okay overall. All right, well, let's see. I might edit this video just a tiny bit, but I think that's it for today. I'll talk to you next week maybe, and we'll see what happens. Thanks for listening. Bye. Feel free to subscribe to stay tuned for future video tutorials that I'll be releasing soon and to follow along with me on this journey. Follow me on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter, or X, or visit lifewell.co for more information about investing. And as always, I'll see you next time.